It's time to get informed, America. Join us as we break through the mainstream media box to bring you real smart news. Hi, I'm Dave Oakenquist. Joining me is the editor of Informed American, the contributor to WallStreetWireNews.com, and the smartest man I know, Mr. Rodney Johnson. Rodney, good morning.
Morning, Dave.
How does this week find you, Rodney? It seems that things have calmed down a little bit since last week.
A little tired, but not terribly far from where I expected to be, so I'm good.
Okay, good. I had the tropical storm / hurricane. I'm not sure exactly what it was when it made landfall a couple days ago, but we made it through unscathed. We didn't lose power, just some heavy rain, some storm surge, and some wind. But all in all, not too bad here.
Good. And it moved fast, so it was gone within a day, right?
Yeah, it really blew through, which because you all saw the track where they sort of went to Mexico and then Cuba, then back out into the Gulf, and then it was heading for me. I'm like, no, this is not good. And as you know, living in this area, Tampa is very vulnerable to storm surge if the right storm comes in at the right angle. And this one was actually was at the right angle, but thankfully not strong enough. So we did well. All right, Rodney, let's get into our topics. We had a big announcement, Rodney, from Pfizer that they have a vaccine that was 90% effective, and stocks just exploded on that news. And in fact, the global stock market, just pulling back, looking globally, has seen is now at a record 95 trillion. And part of that was some of the news we saw for the vaccine, some optimism, and maybe pricing in some of that optimism. And of course, global stimulus around the world. I want to show you this chart for you and everybody there watching at home. I mean, look at that. That's a big jump. So looking at this, it would seem like, hey, everything's great. Everything's looking good. The stock market around the world is at all-time highs. People think that maybe we're going to get out of this COVID thing and get back to somewhat normal. Question for you, Rodney: Have investors around the world jumped the gun a little bit?
Well, if the question is, are we going to get back to normal anytime soon? Then yeah, because the vaccine, it was 90% effective as far as it's been tested. And so it has a ways to go. It has to go through the safety profile, and it has to be stored at negative 94 degrees Fahrenheit, which presents a logistical problem in getting it out there. And
well, you don't have a fridge that goes that cold?
And then you've got to truck it and everything else, right? And so there's all sorts of things going on with this. And then you have to get people to take it. And so not many people right about half people take the flu vaccine every year. And that's something we've known about forever. This is brand new, and it's been put through its paces very quickly. And so there are a lot of things that have to come together for us to get this done. And so from that standpoint, yeah, the markets are well ahead, but the markets are forward looking anyway. So That's not terribly surprising. It's something that people probably aren't looking at every day. It's not as much about the vaccine, which is important, of course. It's about central banks, because no one is missing the fact that we're still several percentage points lower in GDP than we were at the beginning of the year, and we're several points below where we were last year. And so our economic growth is not back to where it was, and we still have millions of people unemployed, hundreds of millions of people around the world. And so we have a lot of structural damage to fix, but central banks keep pouring trillions of dollars into this thing. Our own central bank is spending $120 billion a month, newly printed dollars every month, to buy debt. And that money eventually finds its way into things like stocks. And so there's a lot of this being pushed by central banks.
So so in one sense, there's a serious disconnect then in what's going on. So would it be the wrong metric then to try to use the market to gauge where things might be heading in the future on the ground, outside of asset prices? I mean, in terms of what the real economy is going to do, Rodney.
Right. And I think that's a fair point. I've tried to tell people that for a long time. The economy and the markets are not the same thing. They used to be. 30, 40 years ago, the market was a decent barometer of the economy, over time. And it's not that way anymore. If you look at what's happened over the last 7 months since the pandemic hit, you've seen stocks just soar. But these are goods producing stocks, and they're stocks about living at home, like Zoom and Amazon and Microsoft and Nvidia. And so those things are doing quite well. but where you produce goods, where you do services, not so much. And a large chunk of our economy is services. It's paying the people to do the lawn, getting your hair done, going out to eat, going to sporting events, going to, concerts, that sort of thing. And so that's what's fallen off, and it's not captured in the stock markets.
Yeah, I want to briefly bring your attention to a story from Wall Street Wire News. At-home stocks hit hard, since you mentioned them. At-home stocks hit hard as vaccine news has major ripple effects. And a couple here listed here are Zoom, Peloton, Etsy, Grubhub, Netflix. After the announcement from Pfizer, is this trend that we saw with the at-home stocks is something that we talked about before, that this could be a pivot in the economy that was maybe brought forward, I believe was the phrase you used. So with these stocks taking a dive a bit on this news, is that just temporary, or are we still going to be settling into that sort of COVID-19 mentality, for a long time as we do things more at home and more and digitally?
It's going to be a mix. There are a lot of people that are working from home who aren't going back. They don't want to go back. And so a lot of the work at home stocks are going to benefit from that for years to come. And a lot of the areas that are in pain from that, being large commercial buildings and downtown areas, they're going to have pain for a long time. But on the stock front, we had all of these stocks favoring stay at home rising like crazy. And once we got word that a vaccine is likely, then the rotation happens back into the industrials. Yeah. And so the big run up in stocks was the run up in the Dow Jones, which favors goods. And it was a run away from the technology stocks, which favors, of course, all the stay at home stuff. And so it was a rotation. That's the easiest way to describe this. When the vaccination news came out, we had a huge rotation out of technology back into industrials. It's exactly what you would expect. As people get used to the idea that it's going to take some time, do they rush right back into tech? Probably not as much, because the vaccine is now known. There's not an end date, but there's at least this notion that we're going to get to the end, and we're going to be able to open back up, and eventually, not tomorrow, not in the next 2 months, but eventually.
Now, how does not that you give investment advice here, but how does an investor sort of navigate these waters when things are getting rotated in and out based on some news that that just sort of just pop up on a Monday morning that can radically change the market?
Right. Well, most people aren't very good at moving in a day's notice or a moment's notice. And so it's tends to be a losing game. So you go with the long trends. The long trend was tech for quite some time. And now the trend appears to be the large cap industrials, captured by the Dow Jones. And you just kind of, slowly move from one to another over time and let it go, right? You invest for the long haul, as people have said forever, but you tend to favor the ones that are coming into favor and kind of trail out of the ones that seem to be falling. And it's not magic. And so where tech was doing quite well and people were in that, well, maybe, when you're putting your next allocation in for your 401k or whatever, it's more into the Dow Jones stocks instead of the NASDAQ 100 stocks.
I briefly showed a story from CNBC. COVID cases in U.S. could be near zero in 6 months, UBS economist says, moving that prediction forward based on some of the vaccine news. For investors maybe looking ahead, maybe thinking of that, this to me seems overly optimistic. What do you think?
Seems pretty optimistic to me. I'm not buying it. I mean, okay. 6 months from now is what, April? I don't see it.
Particularly with cases spiking, although I saw, Elon Musk, I know he's your favorite guy. I just saw a tweet from him. He's not sure if he has COVID or not. He said he took 4 tests, 2 were positive, 2 were negative from a rapid testing company. So do you make anything of that?
Well, maybe it's his different personalities, because he seems to go back and forth. I don't know. He's clearly a genius. The negative testing issue is false negatives, false positives. False positives really are a problem. Yeah. We're getting better tests that hopefully should tell us more of the T-cell tests instead of the antibody tests. But again, this is still months away from being in the mainstream. And even if he has it, he obviously has a mild case if he doesn't know he has it, because he's not showing enough symptoms to go, yep, I'm the one.
Yeah. Let's shift to politics here, Ron. I got a story you wrote on InformedAmerican.com. After voting to defund police, Minneapolis debates bringing in outside officers amidst crime wave. And this is not the only such story, Rodney. We got another one here. Portland politician that supports defunding police calls 911 over a Lyft ride. Yep. what's good? It's maybe not a good idea to get rid of the cops because it's going to have some real knock-on effects, Rodney, meaning public safety deteriorates.
Well, in Minneapolis, they're suffering for a couple of reasons. One being they've got such a loud voice that is, calling the police out for different things, that they have demoralized their existing police force.
Yeah.
And so they have a very large number of policemen who are retiring. And then they have a fair number who are actually out for medical leave for PTSD. And they don't have very many people saying, oh, please choose me as the next Minneapolis police officer. And so, few recruits, many retirees, people out on medical leave, they're more than 100 officers down or lower in number. And so they just can't get to all the calls. And so the defund the police, I never was a fan of that. I understand wanting to bulk up more of the social side because police are sent on many different calls that they're not equipped to handle. I mean, they're sent on, perhaps, mental issues and people struggling with all sorts of different things that are more social than they are truly criminal. And so you're putting the police in a bad spot to say, hey, go kind of handle everything. But the way some of these cities have gone about it really isn't the right way, or else we wouldn't be in this situation where the police are trying to jump ship.
Yeah, I say here, as you wrote, the city has recorded more than 70 murders and 500 shootings this year, which are on pace to being the highest level since 2005. So, there seems to be I would call it a rather tight correlation.
Right. And what it means is, of course, if they don't have enough policemen to handle these calls, then they're not getting to the marginal calls. They're not getting to the normal breaking and entering where you come home and your house has been robbed, or, your car was busted or broken into. And so they're not getting to the ones that, in the broken window theory, are the ones that lead up to more serious crime. And so it becomes a real problem when you can't even get to the worst crimes because you're not doing anything to tackle the lower level crime before it escalates into something more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess to your earlier point, I understand if there's or maybe men with guns or men and women with guns showing up, it could maybe not help the situation. But if you do send someone, maybe if you, what do they call, redirecting funds to other resources. But even so, I mean, if you send a social worker to a volatile situation, I mean, that person that needs to at least be backed up by somebody that could use violence if the situation goes poorly, right? So I'm not sure that really solves it either.
Right. It doesn't solve the issue to substitute one for the other. You need more, and that's the hard part. You have to spend more money, not less, and you have to send people who have different training on these calls. But to your point, you're now sending two people or two resources where you were previously just sending one. But if you're going to choose one, are you going to send the person without the weapon? It's a call of a person who has a history of mental illness who has a knife.
Yeah.
You send, a social worker to try and, deal with it. Boy, that sounds dangerous.
And in fact, that was a recent story. And yeah, I'm not sure I mean, it's possible that there could have been some de-escalation, but I'm a little dubious of that. It's particularly when cities around the country are really struggling to get revenue, right? It's the economy tanks and sucks. And then some of these cities are like, we don't have the cash. And then now we're gonna spend more on these resources, right?
Yeah, it's very difficult. The larger cities are the ones that, of course, just they're broke. I mean, that's the simple way to say it. New York is in either a $9 billion or $14 billion hole, depending on, what time frame you're looking at. City of Chicago is broke. Most large cities that rely on commuters to come in and work during the day are just reeling right now, and they don't know what they're going to do. And so there is no path forward other than Uncle Sam kicking in literally hundreds of billions of dollars to fill those budget holes.
Ronnie, let's move to where politics and economics sort of converge a bit. And this story here from WallStreetWireNews.com. Does Parler pose a legitimate threat to Facebook? If you haven't heard of Parler yet, give it a day or two. In these divisive times, the latest and greatest social media platform promises a haven for free speech. Parler pledges a, quote, unbiased social media platform focused on real user experiences and engagement and free expression without violence and no censorship. And they're not the only one. There's another one called MeWe. And in fact, Rodney, the Parler app, which is basically a Twitter clone, a Twitter alternative, hit the top of the App Store for the first time over the weekend, which is oops, sorry, I got something playing here. And Fox Business host Maria Bartiromo moved over to Parler as well, and she now has 1 million followers on the app. So the question for you is this the beginning of maybe the breakup of these tech monopolies, or is this just a little bit of post-election angst and people fleeing, getting mad at, say, Twitter censoring the president and stuff like that? What do you make of this as these startups kind of showing their growth over the last week?
I think it's interesting, but it's difficult, right? I mean, Maria Bartiromo moving over there, she's obviously high profile, took a lot of people with her.
Yeah.
But for it to make sense for the average person, there have to be the other people that you want to hear from and talk to. Yeah. And so it's one of those chicken and egg things, right? I see a time where people have both. And over, whatever period of time, they either shut off Parler because it didn't ever really get enough traction, or they migrate. And so I think it's great because it's competition, and it tells platforms like Twitter and Facebook, hey, people are looking for something that you're not offering. And so those platforms have a choice. They can either retool how they do their business to say, you know what, we want to be more inclusive of all these people, or they can say, we're really good with it, go away, we're happy doing what we do. And that's okay, right? And so I'm glad to see it, because it is competition and it gives people an outlet. I mean, it's not like 4chan where people are looking going, hey, here's a place to do criminal things, that's wonderful. It's instead, hey, I've got an opinion that is getting censored by Facebook and Twitter, and I don't think this is right. And by the way, there are millions of people like me, just regular people who don't want this to be the way it is. And so they're looking for that competitive offering. And we finally got it. Yeah.
But the question is, how big will it get? And this sort of thing is hard. You can't just manufacture it. You know what I mean? I mean, are all 72 million, 73 million Trump voters all going to move over to Parler? I find that unlikely in MeWe.
Right.
So I'm not.
It's better. You look at it the other direction. The number of tweets created by less than 10% of the people on Twitter. I mean, it's a ridiculous percentage, and I don't remember what it is, but it's like over 90% of tweets are created by less than 10% of the users. Yeah. And so that's the weirdness, where you have to, it's not so widespread and even that you can move over some people and it really starts to, create this cluster. You have to get some of the influencers, the big influencers, the people want to follow, like Elon Musk. If Elon Musk went to Parler, and he may be there for all I know, I don't, because I'm not on it yet. But that's the kind of thing where people go, oh, okay, I want to do that. But not only do they have to move exclusively. It has to be a point of pain to where you can't get that same thing on Twitter that you're getting on Parler. Yeah. And so if somebody straddles the fence and does both, that really doesn't do it.
Right. That's exactly right. Most of us use these, well, many of us tweet or post on Facebook, but most of us simply consume, and we're looking for that variety of content for us to consume. And yeah, if it's all just, well, okay, so I'm a right winger, say I'm a conservative or something, so I can go to Parler and I can get the real drugs on Parler, right. But that's all that's there is the drug. I can't get anything else because everything is still on the other platforms.
That's the problem.
Now, what's the outlook here? Just total speculation. I assume you're leaning towards this is going to fizzle. That's sort of where I am. We may get.
I don't know. Because 2 years ago I would have said fizzle, because there wasn't the power behind it to make the change. But with this election, people are very angry because they've seen conservative voices stifled, and they've seen what clearly half America thinks are reasonable questions being censored, and said, no, this isn't correct. And so while these companies have the right to do this because they're private companies, they can make the rules as they see fit. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that we have to follow it. And so I think there's a lot of power. Does it start as a more conservative thing where it's pulling Maria Bartiromo and others who say, hey, I don't like this? Yeah, but it has to start somewhere. And then does it become something else where it becomes much more mainstream, pulling over all sorts of other people? And that's entirely possible.
Yeah. Yeah, so we shall see.
I would love to see that happen. I would love to see a competitive offering, because so much power concentrated in so few hands doesn't sound like a good idea.
No, I agree 100%. Be interesting to see what comes of this. And I agree, more competition, the better. So good luck, Parler. Good luck, MeWe. as they must diversify. I think that's the point. Get a more diverse set of users, and then they have a chance. Two quick things here before we get out. Rodney, the consumer price index came out. Some of the things that hit highest were airline fares, recreation, new vehicles were those things that rose, while the biggest dips were in motor vehicles, insurance, apparel, and household furnishings and operations. Did you make anything out of this inflation report? Has it ticked down slightly for the month?
I didn't make anything out of it. I saw the numbers. I was impressed that used car and truck prices are up 11.5% over last year. That's going to drive new car prices higher for 2021. The 2021 models are going to be pretty darn expensive. And so that's of some interest. But by and large, what it tells me is that the Federal Reserve is going to be comfortable holding rates near zero for longer, because the longer we have inflation, I think we're running 1.2% on the headline number and 1.6 on core. The longer we're below 2 means the longer that they have to stay quite low after we get above 2 so that the average sits there. So what it tells me is central banks are going to stay involved a long time.
Speaking of low interest rates, Rodney, that leads me to my final point here is that low interest rates have allowed more people to borrow for their homes. We've seen a continued rise in home prices. The median price of a single-family home rose 12% in the third quarter of 2020, according to the National Association of Realtors. That's a big pop. And is this one you expect to continue?
I don't know how long this will go on, because we're reaching the end of the point where we have moratoriums on foreclosures and deferral programs and other things. And so I think we're going to have some pain early next year as we go through the process of reopening the economy and these support programs sunset. And so I think you're going to see more homes hit the market because, frankly, people are unemployed and can't pay. And so it's going to be a weird transition as we try to come out of this. And I think one of the areas you're going to see this is in the housing market. Not that it goes down, but that the incredible growth rate that we saw from tight inventory and rising demand, it balances out.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. Rodney, I want to thank you for joining me. I want to thank you all for watching. And I'd love to know what you think about all of these topics. Are you on Parler? Are you on MeWe?
Yeah.
I'd be curious.
That'd be interesting to know how many people are on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly as we're thinking about maybe joining the platform, if we maybe have an audience there. So comment down below on all of this stuff. Of course, we'd love it if you'd hit the like button here, share this video with your friends, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course, head on over to informedamerican.com and wallstreetwirenews.com. And Rodney, if they do that, what kind of stories do you think what kind of stories are they going to get into their inbox over the weekend, and something to keep an eye on over the coming days?
Well, I think it's going to be growth. I think people are going to be talking about the economy, and they're going to be talking about what's not going on and how we see a really long recovery. And then it's going to be the shutdowns. I mean, we've already seen Chicago and Illinois essentially say, don't do Thanksgiving. And so I wonder how much more of that's going to happen as we see these COVID cases rise around the nation. So if people have travel plans for Thanksgiving, they should be watching the news, because it's entirely likely that the state that they're in is going to say, don't do this, and put out some moratorium on it. And so that could really, really throw a wrench into people's travel plans.
Well, it gives a good excuse to stay away from family this year, doesn't it, Rodney?
As people have said, right? If you often have contentious holidays, this is a great reason to say, wow, can't make it. So.
Great. For Rodney Johnson, I'm Dave Okenquist telling you to get informed, America.
You've been listening to Get Informed, America, brought to you by the Informed American Radio Network. Please like and subscribe today in order to get new exclusive weekly episodes. Any questions, thoughts, or comments can be sent directly to info@informedamerican.com. And don't forget to visit informedamerican.com to keep up with real, smart news. Until next time, fight fake news and find common ground.